One of the most valuable things I have from my father is a series of video interviews that we did together over the course of a few years, where he explored his life, his memories, and shared those with me and the family. A record we have forever. Here's how that came about. Some years ago, a motivational speaker named Brendan Burchard wrote a blog post. I happened to read it. It was titled 20 Questions I Wish I Asked My Dad Before He Died. And I thought, hey, my dad's still alive. I have a video camera. I printed out those questions and I flew to New York, and thus began some interviews with my dad. Thus began 20 questions with my dad. And I was super lucky because that experience deepened our already pretty good relationship. Because when a son is in the role of an interviewer for a father, he's doing something not most of us do all the time, which is listening. And that process of asking questions, discovering stories, listening to my dad got juicier and juicier over time. And when he passed away, the most cherished possession I have left are those videos. They're real life. I was left with no stone unturned because I have videos of my father talking about his life, about us as children, about what his family meant to him, about what his career was all about. But also very specifically, you kids have turned out great. We uncovered some stories, my dad and I, that he didn't even remember. I got to watch him load up the answers to the questions that I posed. One of the most fascinating ones was when I said, tell me about your first date with Mom. Ooh, he said, it was a crisp, cold day in October. We were going to meet in Manhattan at the Metropolitan Museum of Art on Fifth Avenue. And I got there 2 hours early. So I got a great parking spot. And he then began to unfold the rest of that day for me. How she looked as she walked down the sidewalk, what she was wearing, what her hand felt like the first time he took it. Understand, he's unpacking a story he hadn't thought about in this depth. And he's telling me about something that happened at the time 62 years prior. And watching that process was great. And the process of questions and answers and discovering stories helped me understand just how fascinating my parents' lives were, but also the impact and the threads that they had on my life. And they now are available to us all the time. It's, in fact, the lasting legacy. And I started talking about how great this was with a couple of friends of mine, and well, would you do that for my dad? Would you do that with me? Could we sit down with my parents? And so I began doing the 20 Questions video project with my friends and with my family. And thus began a little business. 20 Questions with My Dad is titled from a male perspective, right? Because that's what I know. I'm a man talking to my dad, a woman asking questions of her mother, kids asking questions of their parents together. I've done it in every different configuration. And without fail, it has created a really momentous kind of memory of that time together. But then the stories that are told, the moment that was created, all of that's captured on video to be enjoyed on and on. My dad asked me at one point during the interview process, well, yeah, he wasn't a braggadocious kind of guy. He wasn't full of himself. He was just a really cool, decent guy, very smart, very talented. He said, oh, who's going to care about all these stories? And I realized he was telling me those stories for us, for his kids, but also his grandson, 22 years old in the Air Force, going to want to hear those stories and share them with his kids. And I asked one of the most fascinating questions I've ever asked him, and I ask it of everybody when I'm interviewing them out. I said, what sort of advice might your grandparents have for your grandchildren, right? So now we're taking family history, ethics, advice, values across 5 generations. His grandma and grandpa, his parents, him, his kids, his grandkids. 5 generations of wit and wisdom and character, and that all gets captured through the 20 questions process. It is the most fun I have. I'm fascinated by people's stories. I'm fascinated by your story as much as I'm fascinated by mine and my dad's. I think over time we talk a lot about stories and family stories and the history and how human history has been passed down from generation to generation using story. And this is a way that you can capture your family stories, that you can participate in the unwrapping of your family treasures and capture them for future generations. Most of all, it's a process that brings you closer together. Interviewer, interviewee, child, parent, children, parents. It's a process that brings people together, tunes them in, and the children, for the first time, are listening. Maybe not for the first time, but you have a situation where the children are listening to the parents, and the parents kind of sink into that. My dad sort of sank into that because my response to almost everything he said is, really? Tell me more. If this is the kind of thing that you'd like to explore doing with your family, for your family, I would love to talk to you about it. Hi, I'm Mike Wolpert. This is the story of 20 Questions with My Dad.